My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been a private investigator for 17 years. I work out of Chicago, mostly handling insurance fraud, cheating spouses, and the occasional missing person case. I've seen a lot in this line of work. People at their worst, people at their most desperate, people doing things they'd never want anyone to know about. But in all my years doing this job, nothing prepared me for what happened during what should have been a routine surveillance case in the fall of 2019. The client was a man named David Brennan, mid-40s, successful business owner, married for 12 years. He came into my office on a Tuesday afternoon looking exactly like every other suspicious husband I'd ever met. Tired, anxious, desperate for answers he was afraid to hear. His wife's name was Rachel. David said she'd been acting strange for the past few months, coming home late, being secretive with her phone, making excuses about where she'd been. All the classic signs. He wanted me to follow her, see if she was meeting someone, get proof if she was having an affair. Standard stuff. I quoted him my rate. He agreed without hesitation, and we shook hands. I told him I'd start the next day. Wednesday evening, I picked up Rachel's trail at 5:30 p.m. when she left her office downtown. She drove a silver Lexus, easy to spot. I stayed 3 cars back, just another piece of traffic, and followed her north out of the city. At first, I thought she was heading to a hotel or maybe someone's apartment. That's usually how these things go. But she kept driving, getting farther and farther from downtown, into neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Eventually, she pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall on the far north side. Half the storefronts were vacant, windows covered with brown paper. The only businesses still operating were a liquor store and what looked like a pawn shop. Rachel parked near the back of the lot and sat in her car for about 5 minutes. I parked 4 rows away with a clear line of sight. I had my camera ready, telephoto lens, waiting to see who she was meeting. Then she got out of her car and walked toward one of the vacant storefronts. Not the liquor store, not the pawn shop, one of the empty units with papered-over windows. She knocked on the door. 3 times, then twice, then once. A pattern, like a code. The door opened, and she went inside. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide my next move. This wasn't typical affair behavior. People having affairs meet at hotels, at apartments, at restaurants. They don't meet in abandoned storefronts. I grabbed my camera and got out of my car, walked across the parking lot as casually as I could. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. The whole place felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. I approached the storefront where Rachel had entered. The windows were completely covered, no way to see inside. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. Voices, multiple voices, at least 4 or 5 people inside. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was off, not conversational, more like chanting, rhythmic, repetitive. Every instinct I had told me to walk away. This wasn't what David had hired me for. This wasn't about an affair. This was something else entirely. But I'd taken the case. I'd taken his money, and I needed to know what Rachel was doing in there. I walked around to the back of the building. There was a rear entrance, a metal door with no handle on the outside, but next to it was a window, small and high up, with the glass completely blacked out from the inside. I found an old crate in the alley and used it to boost myself up. I scraped away some of the black paint with my pocket knife until I had a small hole, maybe the size of a quarter, that I could see through. What I saw inside made my stomach drop. The space was empty except for candles. Dozens of candles arranged in a circle on the floor. and in the center of that circle were 6 people, all dressed in dark clothes, all standing in a circle holding hands. Rachel was one of them. They were chanting something in a language I didn't recognize, their voices rising and falling in unison. And in the very center of their circle, on the floor, was something that looked like a symbol, drawn in what I hoped was red paint. I'd seen enough. I climbed down from the crate as quietly as I could and walked back to my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I didn't know what I'd just witnessed. Some kind of ritual? A cult? Whatever it was way above my pay grade. I called David that night and told him I needed to meet with him. He came to my office the next morning, and I showed him the photos I'd taken of Rachel entering the building. I told him what I'd seen through the window. His face went pale. He didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "How long has she been doing this?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "But based on her behavior, probably a few months at least." David thanked me and left. I thought that would be the end of it. I'd done my job. Whatever Rachel was involved in, it was their problem now, not mine. But 2 days later, David called me. His voice was frantic, panicked. "She's gone," he said. "Rachel's gone. She didn't come home last night. Her phone's off. I can't find her anywhere." I told him to call the police, file a missing person report. But David said he couldn't. He said if the police started investigating, they'd find out about what Rachel had been doing, and he couldn't let that happen. He begged me to help him find her. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I drove back to that strip mall that night. The parking lot was empty. The storefront was dark. I knocked on the door using the same pattern Rachel had used. 3 times, twice, once, nothing. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. I pushed the door open slowly. The interior was completely dark except for a faint glow coming from the back of the space. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside. The candles were gone. The symbol on the floor was gone. The whole place looked like it had been scrubbed clean, but there was a smell in the air, something chemical and sharp, like bleach, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. I walked toward the back of the space where I'd seen the faint glow. There was a door I hadn't noticed before, slightly ajar with light coming from behind it. I pushed it open. It was a small storage room, empty except for a folding chair in the center, and sitting on that chair was a piece of paper with my name written on it. Not Marcus Chen, P.I., just Marcus. I picked up the paper with shaking hands. On the back, written in the same handwriting, was a message: "I left that building and never went back." I called David and told him I couldn't help him anymore. I returned his retainer. I told him to go to the police, but I don't know if he ever did. Rachel Brennan was never found. The police investigated but came up empty. No body, no evidence of foul play. She was simply gone. And that note with my name on it? I kept it. It's in a drawer in my office, and sometimes late at night when I'm working alone, I take it out and look at it. Because here's what keeps me up. Whoever wrote that note knew my name. They knew I was watching. They knew I'd come back. And the message wasn't a threat. It was a warning. They were telling me to back off because they didn't want to have to do to me what they'd done to Rachel. I've been a PI for 17 years. I've followed cheating spouses. I've caught thieves. I've found missing people. But that case taught me something important. There are some doors you don't open, some questions you don't ask, because sometimes the answer is worse than not knowing. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I run a small private investigation firm in Seattle. I've been doing this for 12 years, mostly corporate work, background checks, that sort of thing. But I also take on private cases when they come my way. In the spring of 2021, I got a call from a woman named Patricia Huang. She was looking for her brother, Michael, who disappeared 3 weeks earlier. The police had taken a missing person report, but weren't making it a priority. Michael was an adult, he had a history of depression, and there were no signs of foul play. As far as the police were concerned, he'd probably just taken off to start over somewhere else. But Patricia didn't believe that. She said Michael would never disappear without telling her. They were close, he'd been staying with her while he got back on his feet after a divorce, and one day he just didn't come home. His car was still in her driveway. His phone went straight to voicemail. His bank accounts hadn't been touched. She hired me to find him. I started with the basics. Talked to his friends, his ex-wife, his co-workers. Nobody had seen or heard from him. I checked hospitals, homeless shelters, even the morgue. Nothing. Then I went through Michael's room at Patricia's house. Most of it was just clothes and personal items, nothing unusual. But in his desk drawer, I found a notebook. Inside were addresses, written in Michael's handwriting with dates next to them. The dates went back about 6 months. Each address was somewhere in Seattle or the surrounding area. Next to each address was a single word: empty, occupied, watched, or clear. I asked Patricia what these addresses meant. She had no idea. She'd never seen the notebook before. I decided to check out a few of the addresses. The first 3 were apartment buildings and houses where, according to the dates, Michael had visited several months ago. Nothing unusual about any of them. But the 4th address was different. It was a house on Morrison Street in a rundown neighborhood south of downtown. Next to it, Michael had written, "Occupied, do not return," and underlined it 3 times. I sat in my car across the street from that house for about an hour, watching. It was a small, single-story place, paint peeling off the siding, overgrown yard, broken fence. The windows were covered with curtains and I couldn't see any movement inside. There was no car in the driveway, no signs of life. But something about the place made my skin crawl. I decided to knock on the door, just to see if anyone was home, maybe ask if they'd seen Michael. I walked up to the front porch, my hand instinctively checking that my pepper spray was in my pocket. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I knocked again, still nothing. I was about to turn and leave when I heard it. A faint sound coming from inside the house. Not footsteps, not voices, something else. A scratching sound, like nails on wood. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. The scratching continued for a few seconds, then stopped, then started again, over and over, in a rhythmic pattern. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone home?" The scratching stopped immediately. Complete silence. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps moving across the floor inside, getting closer to the door. They stopped right on the other side. I could feel someone standing there, just inches away from me, separated only by the door. "I'm looking for someone," I said. "Michael Huang, have you seen him?" No response, but I could hear breathing now, slow, steady breathing. Then a voice spoke, low and raspy, barely above a whisper. "He's not here." "Do you know where he is?" I asked. Silence. Then, "Leave." The tone wasn't threatening, it was pleading. Like whoever was on the other side of that door was begging me to go. Every instinct told me to listen, to walk away. But I'd taken Patricia's money, I needed answers. "I just need to know if you've seen..." "Leave." This time the voice was louder, desperate, and then the door handle started to turn. I backed away from the door immediately, my heart pounding. The door opened maybe an inch, and I saw a hand reach out, pale, thin, with dirt under the fingernails. That was enough. I turned and ran back to my car, got in, locked the doors, and drove away. I didn't stop until I was several blocks away. Then I pulled over and sat there, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had just happened. I called Patricia and told her I needed to bring the police to that house. She agreed. I contacted the detective handling Michael's case and explained what I'd found. The next day, police got a warrant and entered the house on Morrison Street. I wasn't there when they went in, but the detective called me afterward and filled me in. The house had been abandoned for years. No utilities, no running water, no signs anyone had been living there in any official capacity. But when they searched it, they found evidence that someone had been using it recently. In the basement, they found sleeping bags, empty food containers, and a space heater. And on the wall, written in what looked like charcoal, were dozens of names and dates. Michael Huang's name was there, along with his sister's address and phone number. But they didn't find Michael. The house was empty when police arrived. Whoever had been there was gone. 3 days later, Michael's body was found in a dumpster behind a grocery store about 5 miles from Morrison Street. He'd been dead for at least 2 weeks, cause of death determined to be an overdose. The police ruled it accidental, said Michael had probably been living rough using drugs and died somewhere else before his body was dumped there. But I don't believe that, because the detective told me something else they found in that house on Morrison Street, something that wasn't included in the official report. In the basement, underneath one of the sleeping bags, they found a Polaroid photograph. It was a picture of me, standing on the front porch of that house, taken from inside through a gap in the curtains, taken the day I'd knocked on that door. I gave my statement to the police, but nothing ever came of it. They couldn't identify who'd been living in that house, and without evidence of a crime, there was nothing to investigate. Patricia thanked me for trying to find her brother. She paid my final invoice. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the photograph. I still have it. The police gave it back to me after they closed the case. I keep it in my office safe, and sometimes late at night, I think about that voice on the other side of the door. The way it said, "Leave," with such desperation. Like whoever was in there was trying to warn me about what I don't know. But I do know this. I've driven past that house on Morrison Street a few times since then, just to see if anything's changed. And every time I do, I see the curtains move. Just slightly, like someone's watching. I don't stop anymore, I just keep driving. Because I think whoever's in there is still waiting, and I don't want to know what they're waiting for. My name is James Reeves, and I've been working as a private investigator in Los Angeles for 9 years. Before that, I spent 6 years with LAPD working patrol and then vice. I left the force in 2014 and started my own firm. Mostly I handled cheating spouses, corporate espionage, background checks. Nothing too exciting. But in the summer of 2022, I took on a case that changed the way I think about this job. Changed the way I think about a lot of things, actually. The client's name was Amanda Torres. 28 years old, worked as a graphic designer, lived alone in a small apartment in Silver Lake. She came to my office on a Monday morning looking exhausted and frightened. She told me she had a stalker. It had started about 2 months earlier. At first it was small things, feeling like someone was watching her, seeing the same car parked on her street multiple times, finding her apartment door slightly ajar when she came home, even though she was certain she'd locked it. Then it escalated. She started receiving gifts, flowers left on her doorstep with no note, a necklace in her mailbox, a framed photograph of herself taken from across the street, left on her car windshield. She'd gone to the police, but without a direct threat or evidence of who was doing it, there wasn't much they could do. They told her to document everything, install security cameras, maybe get a restraining order if she could identify the person. But that was the problem. Amanda had no idea who was stalking her, no ex-boyfriends with grudges, no strange encounters at work, no rejected admirers. Whoever was doing this was a ghost. That's where I came in. She wanted me to find out who was stalking her and get enough evidence for the police to take action. I agreed to take the case, started by installing cameras at her apartment, front and back. set up motion sensors. I also began following Amanda myself, keeping watch to see if anyone was tailing her. For the first week, nothing happened. No gifts, no signs of surveillance. I started to wonder if my presence had scared the stalker off, but then on day 8 I noticed something. A car that appeared to be following Amanda as she drove home from work. Dark blue sedan, tinted windows, staying 3 or 4 cars back, but making every turn she made. I followed the sedan, keeping my distance. When Amanda pulled into her apartment complex, the sedan drove past, but circled back and parked on a side street with a clear view of her building. I parked down the block and watched. The sedan sat there for about 30 minutes. I couldn't see who was inside because of the tinted windows. Then the driver's door opened and a man got out. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a dark hoodie, even though it was a warm evening. He walked toward Amanda's building, and I followed on foot, keeping to the shadows. He didn't go to her door. Instead, he stood across the street, partially hidden behind a tree, and just watched her apartment. I could see Amanda moving around inside through her window. I pulled out my phone and started recording. This was exactly the kind of evidence we needed. But then, something strange happened. The man pulled out his own phone and held it up, pointing it at Amanda's window, like he was taking photos or recording video. I was about to approach him, to get his attention and maybe scare him off, when he suddenly turned and looked directly at me. Even from 50 feet away, even with the cap and hoodie obscuring his face, I felt his eyes lock onto mine. And in that moment, I had the strangest sensation. Recognition. Like I knew this person somehow, but I couldn't place him, couldn't see his face clearly enough. He lowered his phone, turned, and walked quickly back toward his car. I followed, trying to get a better look at him, or at least get his license plate number. But by the time I reached the corner, he was already in his car and pulling away. I got a partial plate, 4KJ something, but not enough for a full registration search. I called Amanda and told her what I'd seen. She was terrified, but also relieved that we finally had confirmation someone was actually watching her. I told her to keep her doors and windows locked and that I'd stake out her apartment for the next few nights to see if he came back. He did. The next night, same time, same spot. I was ready this time. I had my camera with a telephoto lens, and I got several clear photos of him standing across from Amanda's apartment, but I still couldn't see his face. The cap and hoodie were too effective. On the third night, I decided to confront him. When he parked his car and walked to his usual spot across from Amanda's building, I approached from behind. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to talk to you." He spun around, and for the first time I got a clear look at his face. My blood went cold. It was me. Not someone who looked like me. Not a relative or a doppelganger. It was my face. My exact face, staring back at me with an expression I couldn't read. I stumbled backward, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. The man, my mirror image, didn't say anything. He just smiled. A small, sad smile that made my skin crawl. Then he turned and walked away. Not running, just walking, calmly, like nothing strange had happened. I should have followed him, should have chased him down, demanded answers, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, watching myself disappear around the corner. When I finally got back to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. I drove to Amanda's building and sat in the parking lot for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Eventually, I went up to her apartment and knocked. When she opened the door, she looked confused. "James, you were just here," she said. My stomach dropped. "What? You knocked on my door about 10 minutes ago, asked if I was okay, don't you remember?" I shook my head. "Amanda, I just got here. That wasn't me." Her face went pale. "What do you mean it wasn't you? It looked exactly like you, sounded like you, knew details about the case." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken over the past few days. The man in the hoodie and cap, standing across from her building. Did he look like this? I asked. She studied the photos, then looked up at me with fear in her eyes. I couldn't see his face in these photos. But James, the person who came to my door, looked exactly like you. Everything about him was identical. I told her to pack a bag, told her to stay with a friend or family member for a few days while I figured this out. She agreed without argument. After she left, I went home and locked myself in my apartment. I checked every window, every door. I set up my own cameras, and then I sat in the dark with my service weapon in my lap, waiting. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, sitting in my apartment, holding my gun, taken from outside my window. Below the photo was a message. "You should have stayed out of it. Now I have to follow you too." I jumped up and ran to the window. The street below was empty. No cars, no people, nothing. I called the police, showed them the text, explained the situation. They took a report, but there wasn't much they could do. The number was from a burner phone, untraceable. Amanda fired me the next day. Said she couldn't trust me anymore, didn't know if I was part of the problem or not. I didn't blame her. I'd have done the same thing. I spent weeks trying to figure out who was doing this, how someone could look exactly like me. Was it prosthetics? CGI? Some kind of elaborate prank? But the more I investigated, the less sense it made. Because other people started reporting seeing me in places I'd never been. My ex-girlfriend said I showed up at her house drunk one night, even though I hadn't had a drink in 2 years. A client said I'd called and left a threatening voicemail, even though I had an alibi for that time. It was like there were two of me, and the other me was destroying my life, piece by piece. I don't take stalking cases anymore. I don't take cases involving surveillance or following people, because I learned something during Amanda's case that I'll never forget. Sometimes the person you're looking for is looking right back at you. And sometimes, when you stare into the abyss long enough, something stares back wearing your face. I still get the texts sometimes, photos of myself taken from angles I never knew existed, reminders that somewhere out there, someone or something is walking around with my face, living a life parallel to mine. And the worst part? I've started to wonder, am I the original or am I the copy? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to find out.